Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is AJ from the Paladin Journal, and we are back to talking about Rings of Power. Now, this last time I talked about season one. I did a full rewatch of the show. It took me a while, and the video was a little bit. It was definitely not my best. I rambled on quite a bit, I feel, and also I feel that there was a lot of just dead space in it because I was repeating a lot of things over and over and I wasn't really cohesive with my thoughts. So hopefully this video about season 2 is going to be a lot better. Now the thing with season 2, just to get into things straight up, is that Amazon debuted the season with a 3 episode premiere. This is very strange to me because it feels like they just want to front load as much information about the show as they possibly can, which I think is a huge mistake. It actually does the opposite of what I think they were hoping for. It gives the people too much to focus on at one time. The episodes are structured in a very particular way, and that is because in episode one they focus on a small number of storylines. In episode two, they expand on those storylines and add in some of the other missing storylines, and then in episode three, they add in more of the so far missing characters, and that just creates kind of like this conundrum of okay, what is really going on? There's this happening and this happening, and we should be talking about this and we should be talking about that, but then this also happened and we have to talk about that. It just creates so much confusion. It's the reason I think it didn't land in the way that the executives thought it would is because they're trying to do two things at once. They're trying to have the show be episodic and also be a streamer show, which, it doesn't quite work. You cannot do it 50-50. You commit to it one way or the other, and I fully believe that they should have just done, at best, a 2 episode premiere and then let things flow. However, this is it, and I'm going to be covering the first 3 episodes, so to speak. I just finished watching episode 3, and when I left off with my season 1 rewatch, it was like, there's so much I feel is wrong with this show, particularly having to do with some of the characterization, having to do with the pacing, and just the overall meandering nature of the show, which I feel is all the criticisms that I still have about the show, because I don't think anything has really changed on that front. At the end of season one, we see that Halbrand is revealed to be Sauron. We see that during the Elder King Durin has refused aid to the elves, and the rings have been forged with the small sliver of mithril that Prince Durin gifted to Elrond at the end, towards the end of the show. And what happens with those rings is just something like, it's all mired in all this controversy, the unspoken words between Elrond and Galadriel having to do with, who really was Halbrand. We carry on from there. Now, I'll be clear. The season 2, it starts off with possibly one of the most interesting things that they have done on the show thus far. We see the end of the first age and the dawning of the second age. Morgoth has been defeated. Orcs across Middle Earth, they are in retreat. I believe the location of the fortress that they're at it's in Forodwith. Uh, I I think that's the name that came up on the TV when I was watching the episode. And what they show us is Sauron and Adar, who has been we had Joseph Mawley in season one, who portrayed Adar, and now for some reason I have no idea why I didn't check up on this. He has been replaced with Sam Hazeldine. Sam Hazeldine is the new Adar, and we have Sauron, and we have orcs, and they're all deciding what to do with themselves, basically, in this new age, the second age of Middle Earth. And it seems that there's some confusion. There is some, you know, internal conflict because it seems that Sauron is pushing for something that is like the orc service to Morgoth, and he just wants to carry it on with some grand schemes that will just cost a lot of orc lives, and they are really not down with that. Adar seems like he is trying to he's trying to understand his perspective, but he's pretty much sad. And there's an internal conflict within him as well, which I thought was really interesting. The really cool part, though, is that Sauron at this point is not portrayed by Charlie Wickers. He's portrayed by a different actor, which kind of lends itself to the just the whole what's the whole aesthetic, I guess, or the whole deal with Sauron is that he shifts his forms. So this is a very different form of Sauron. He's portrayed by a different actor, and while I felt that the actor kind of didn't live up to the hype, so to speak, because Sauron, we have seen Sauron be this absolute freaking badass, scary as fuck character in the Peter Jackson movies. But and even in in Rings of Power season one, towards the end, the way Charlie Wickers expertly portrayed this different side of Sauron, it was like it really grips you. This performance, I felt it didn't really live up to that. However, I could kind of understand it because Sauron in this point is just he's trying to gain an army for himself. So he's trying to placate the orcs, and he's acting a little subservient. But then he's like he kind of goes crazy towards the end when he basically gets Caesared by all of them, including Adar, which I thought was really neat. And then they showed how over possible centuries, even possibly a whole thousand years or whatever, how Sauron actually regenerates, and that is a really cool sequence. And I wish we had seen a little bit more of that. It felt something like the writers like, oh, we have this really cool idea, and they almost execute it the way that they wanted to, but it falls a little flat because I think it was over a little too quickly. However, all that said, the CGI stuff absolutely amazing, and this is pretty much the origin story of the character of Halbrand, Sauron as Halbrand, and we see how he gains the that heraldry on the pouch that Galadriel remarked on more than once in season one, and it's really cool stuff because it's like, okay, so we know everything that Sauron tells Galadriel in season one, whether it's from the beginning or it's towards the end, and it raises more questions. What exactly happened? Well, this is the writer saying, okay, so this is what exactly happened, and then they switch to the whole ring story with Galadriel chasing after Elrond, who has apparently just taken the rings from Celebrimbor. He's stolen them, and he's just running off to Gil-galad. And Galadriel's after him, telling him to give the rings back, and all that stuff. And it's basically Elrond snitching on Galadriel. But once again, it's like they wanted to do something really cool, and they almost get there, but then they kind of don't. One thing that really took me out of that moment wasn't that Galadriel was chasing after Elrond, or that Elrond had kind of uncharacteristically, done something very impulsive. It's that when they get close to Lindon, or the gates of Lindon, Elrond, he just like he goes into the city and he kind of disappears. And Galadriel is like, she spends like 3 seconds looking around, like, okay, where am I? Where did he go? And then she goes to Lindon, and I'm like, you're like the commander of the Northern armies. You're like one of the most senior commanders that Gil-galad has, and you're like 10,000 years old or something at this point. It's like, how do you forget the path to essentially your home city? It's just like so weird. But at the same time, when we get that confrontation between Gil-galad and Galadriel after Elrond's told Gil-galad everything that he knows, and Gil-galad's like, "Don't lie to me," and Galadriel's like, she's trying to evade the truth. I thought that was really well done. Benjamin Walker, I think he did a pretty good job as Gil-galad in that scene, but I thought he could have been a little bit more forceful because he's like, he's kind of like, okay, I'm suffering you to speak right now, so you better speak. I would have liked a little bit more edge to him, whereas Galadriel was like, she's basically, the kid with hand in the cookie jar kind of situation. So, she has to tell who it is, who helped her forge the rings and everything, and everything follows on from there. And it's just like, it's kind of really wonderful stuff, because it shows that elves are not as monolithic as we've seen them before, and there's so much more nuance to each and every one of these characters because Gil-galad is basically at his wit's end right now. Elrond, he's too caught up with his beliefs and his morals. Galadriel, she's just trying to make well of the worst kind of situation she could have been in, and that is all leading up to you know obviously Master Círdan, and man, what a performance from the actor, right? It was just like absolutely marvelous stuff from the first scene we see him in to when the guy speaks, and just his whole attire, his whole, his aura. You could say it's just like you can really believe that Círdan really is the oldest elf in Middle Earth, because quite literally he is. If I'm not mistaken, he is. There were three elves who led the Elven tribes from eastern areas of Middle Earth all the way towards the coasts on the western edge of Beleriand, and the three tribes were there were Elwë, Finwë, and I believe Olwë. So Elwë, I believe he becomes Eleuthingol, who rules over all the Sindarin elves in Middle Earth, and Finwë he goes to Numenor, and Olwë he also goes to sorry, not Numenor, Valinor. Not sure what I said. Should be Valinor. So Finwë goes to Valinor and he sits with his people at the feet of the Valar, right? And Olwë, I believe he doesn't go all the way to Valinor, like in the heart of Valinor, but he stays on the outskirts. What is the name? Tol Eressëa? No, not Tol Eressëa. It's really cool stuff. They're the three leaders of the Elven people at the dawn of time, basically, when the elves have just sprung up in Middle Earth and they've been discovered by one of the Vala, and the Vala is like he's taking them with him to Valinor because the Valar have been waiting for the coming of the first children of Eru Ilúvatar, which are the elves. And I believe Círdan is either a cousin to Elwë or a cousin to Olwë. And his shtick is basically that he just loves the sea too much, and he loves Middle Earth as well, and he just like stays where he is, and he eventually becomes a master shipwright. His name even actually means shipwright. So when you say Master Círdan, the shipwright, what you're saying basically is Master Shipwright, the shipwright, which is odd, but that's the Elven language for you, Kenya. And just like I loved seeing the Bay. We never really got to see any of it really in the movies, especially in Return of the King, because that's really not the focus at all. So getting to see all of that here is just a pleasure, and it's all played wonderfully by the actor, and all the other actors when they interact with him is really great stuff. And here I want to talk about a particular spoiler that I feel is very relevant. So if you have not seen the first episode, just know I'm giving you a warning right now. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. Beware. So anyways, so what happens is that when Galadriel and Gil-galad are having their talk, and Gil-galad is like, I literally have no freaking choice. Elrond, just give me the rings, and I'll decide what to do. And Elrond is like, no, and he just takes the rings and he jumps into the water, because where they're standing in Lindon at that moment. It's near the golden tree, and there's a waterfall right there, and Elrond just jumps in, and then he eventually ends up at Círdan's place, and he's like he's telling Círdan that you are the oldest and the wisest of all of us, and I need your help, and I think these rings are evil and that they should be destroyed. Círdan tries to give him a balanced view, but he ultimately bows to the request that Elrond is making, and he's like, okay, so in the bay, right where the bay ends and the ocean begins, there's a huge chasm where a long ago battle, sunk the continent or whatever, which refers to the destruction of Beleriand at the end of the first age when the Valar came to help the elves and men against Morgoth. That battle eventually, essentially sunk most of Western Middle Earth. And so I believe that is what that reference is, which is I think really kind of neat because it's something that whenever they reference stuff in the first age, it always gets my blood going because the first age is just such an incredible, rich story. It's a tapestry that involves pretty much every relevant person, whether it's Fëanor, it's Fingolfin, Morgoth, Sauron, even Beren and Luthien, Finrod, Galadriel, all those people, they're all involved in so many degrees. And it's just a fantastic era to draw inspiration from, which, I still lament that the rights for the first age are not available. Basically, the rights to everything in the Silmarillion are not available. Because I think that would have been an amazing show. Because it would have satisfied, the Lord of the Rings diehards. It would have satisfied all the people who want, massive pitched battles, who want more fantasy stuff on screen, and I think that could have satisfied pretty much everyone across the board because it literally has everything, right? But anyways, so Círdan he goes by himself to, destroy the rings, and when he takes them out, he takes a pouch out, and he's about to throw them in. His boat is rocked. He drops a pouch, and he gets a glimpse of the rings. And then it's like, his heart is turned by the rings, which is like an interesting thing to see happen on the screen because he remarks on it that, and this is also going back in reference to what Celebrimbor said in season 1, that the work of Fëanor turned the heart of the enemy, referring to Morgoth. Because Morgoth looked at the Silmarils and he was just like enchanted by them, their beauty and their depth and everything, right? And that is what Celebrimbor has achieved now with the three rings. And from there, it's just such a sharp twist away, and we are in Lindon. Galadriel is back, Elrond is back, and Gil-galad is like he's singing a lament because now the last of the leaves are falling from the golden tree, and they have to depart Middle Earth. And it's like boom, just as the lament ends, Círdan appears, and he's like, "I have the answer. We need to use the rings." And it's like, okay, that abrupt just like shift in perspective, and characters like, what? And yeah, the episode kind of like towards the end, it's like okay, so it's kind of ending on the resurgence of Lindon because the rings they kind of do what they're meant to do, and as soon as all three of them are wearing it, Círdan is wearing one, Gil-galad is wearing one. One ring drops, Galadriel takes it, she puts it on. Lindon is restored, the golden tree is restored, which is like it's an amazing visual. Props to the team for that amazing visual. But then it's like I am already not such a big fan of the storyline because what we know from Lord of the Rings, and not necessarily the Silmarillion or the Unfinished Tales, is that the power of the rings was more subtle. But this is like a very overt display of power, which kind of fits with the theme that they're going for. Just hacking so many storylines, meshing it all together, and everything. But then there's also all the Mordor stuff that's going on. And I'm going to like flow into stuff from episode 2 and episode 3 with this because it's all taken together. But essentially, we see at the end of season 1 that Halbrand escapes from Eregion and he goes to Mordor because the Mount Doom, as it will be known, it's awoken and it's created this land for the orcs to live in. It's their land now. And it's like, okay, so he's going to like take control over there, right? And as it turns out, no. This is where like, I start to like lose faith in the writing team. So Halbrand, he's just escaped Eregion. He knows that Galadriel knows who he is. He practically told her. He thinks that, she's probably told Celebrimbor and everybody else as well who he is, which, we saw in the end of season 1 that, she tells Celebrimbor and everyone that none of us are to treat with Halbrand again and not invite him in. Let's say he goes to Mordor, he turns himself in to the orcs. He's brought before Adar, and he tries to make a deal with Adar while presenting himself as the king of Southlands that he was pretending to be in the second half of season one. And it's like, okay, what are you doing here? And then it's like, he tries to bargain with him. And it's like, I'll tell you about Sauron, because Sauron's back, and the elves are seeking some kind of power from him, and he's your biggest enemy, and you need to hunt him down. I can tell you who he is. Just release all these people of Southlands. Just let them go free. It's like, okay, we need to kind of like need to know more what your plan is at this point, because why does he want the people to go free? He doesn't give a rat's ass about them. They mean nothing to him. But he bargains, and it's like, I am just like thoroughly confused what is going on. And at the end is like, at the end of the whole series of scenes that are set in Mordor, Adar eventually agrees to let him go because, it's the fear of Sauron and the return of Sauron. Because Adar struck the first blow against him while, Sauron was like all ready for his coronation as the new Dark Lord in the start of episode one. So I'm like, okay, I can kind of understand what they're going for. Sauron is just stoking the fires everywhere, right? And he wants there to be a war so he can take advantage of it. Because the war has to happen. That is going to fuel the creation of the rings and everything, and it's what's going to give him great power in the end. But I'm just still so confused. Even after the end of episode 3, I'm still so confused about what his plan is. And then he goes back to Region, because now he has to forge the 7 and the 9. 7 for the dwarves, 9 for the men. So it's like, okay. And he just shows up, and then there's a new character called Merdania, who is an apprentice smith under Celebrimbor, and she's kind of partial to him. She kind of tries to nudge Celebrimbor into accepting Halbrand into the city, which in itself was kind of weird because he just walks in, and Celebrimbor, instead of like having him sent away, is like, just let him stand there with his horse and looking all miserable and puppy dog. And eventually I'm just gonna acquiesce. Like, eh? And then, the whole thing with Merdania, I have seen some spoilers about what happens in episode 4 and 5. So let's forget that. But one of the things I saw when the episodes came out was that Merdania, her name is a really odd name. If her name was like Merdanel or something along those lines, it would have been a better fit for the Elven language, how the names are supposed to be. Merdania, it's supposed to evoke the Gwed i Merdine, which are the smiths who work under Celebrimbor. He is basically the master of the smiths in Eregion, and these are, his craftspeople. It's his, you could say it's his guild, his group, essentially, that he leads. So the name's supposed to reflect that. But it's like, it's kind of like a really cheap thing, You could have gone for like any other name, but you went with this one. And it seems that they've half-assed it. It's like, it already starts to turn you off from the character. But then there's also, all the so much stuff going on in general, which then, it's like, so that's where, and at the end of the episode, he reveals himself to Celebrimbor, Halbrand. But instead of, he doesn't tell him that he's Sauron. He says, I'm a messenger from the Valar. I've been sent to help the elves and the men and the dwarves of Middle Earth, and my name is Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. Which, they are plucking in so much stuff from the Silmarillion and, other associated works, and, they're crafting the story for how he essentially fools Celebrimbor into making more rings. So it becomes like this really interesting plot point. The whole sequence is well done. Although I felt that it was also weird because they went very um, Jesus Christ style with it, very Christian style, and I felt that it really took me out of the story. If they had given, because the thing with all of this, with the way that Tolkien wrote everything, and how Christopher Tolkien, added on to all of that stuff later, is that the power displayed by the powerful, that would be the Valar, that would be the Istari, and even the ring bearers, the Elven ring bearers, their powers, they're they all have a lot of power with them, right? And their power is it works in subtle ways. They don't do over displays, which I mean, it totally fits Sauron. He is going all out. He really needs to convince Celebrimbor to forge the rings, and so he's pulling out all the stops. He's going full out, and he's not leaving anything chance. He's like, okay, 200% charisma, roll. It's a natural 20, so to speak. But it still really took me out of the story at that point. You could have him display his majesty in a different way. You didn't have to go, with the whole sun shining with the clouds in the back, the sunrise, and he's framed as this like Jesus Christ type figure and everything. It was like too weird, man. It's like, yeah, not really on with that. So, anyways, moving on to so now let's move on to the other big storyline from episode two, which is everything to do with the dwarves, because now the dwarves are taking center stage. So everything in episode one is all about Sauron. Everything is about the elves. Episode two, we continue on with that, as I said, and we also introduce the dwarves into the mix. And this is really interesting because the awakening of Mount Doom in Mordor, or the Southlands, that causes earthquakes all over Middle Earth, which apparently they don't reach all the way to Lindon for some reason, because there's no mention of it, but they do happen to reach Khazad-dûm. And that the whole sequence where you have Durin and Tisa, they're in the market. Durin has just been disowned by his father, basically, out of in anger, and so he's not living in the palace anymore. He's living more like a commoner. He's working as a miner and everything, and they have to go to the market like ordinary dwarves and get their supplies and everything. And they're just having a bit of a tiff, a lover's quarrel, when suddenly Tiza, she feels something about to happen, and she tells people to brace. They don't listen to her. There's a there's a there's an earthquake. Everybody listens to her now, and then you see just the incredible damage that is done to Khazad-dûm. Because the beauty of Khazad-dûm is that dwarves dug these light shafts all over the heart of the mountain to carry the sun's rays, carry the sun's power to all over the city using mirrors and just plain old dwarven engineering, and all of that is destroyed, which basically plunges the entire city into darkness, so to speak, because the sun's light is no more. So they all have to basically survive with candles and torches and all that stuff, which I thought was a really neat touch, and it just really makes you feel the dwarves. They have had no hand really in all that's going on, and now they're suffering. So the whole episode is just about the Durins disagreeing with each other, Diza trying to play referee, and also Diza and her friends, her co-workers among the Stone Singers, because this was made really clear, I think, in this episode with subtext, that Stone Singers, they're all women, and I thought that was a really interesting thing. And they're working in more story, right? They're building the world of the dwarves, and all of that is really needed. And we also get to meet Narvi for the first time. Narvi is one of the most famous dwarves from Khazad-dûm, because I believe he is the one who invents the Ithildine. Is it Ithildine? Ithildine, the silver runes that are to be found on the gates of Khazad-dûm. Later on, down the centuries, that's what's supposed to happen because him and Celebrimbor work on the runes together, and then it's they're written on the door from one of the lake entrances, whatever it is, and that's one of the secret doors leading into Khazad-dûm. So that was really neat. He's kind of like he's a bit of a goof, it seems, but he's an honest guy and loved everything about Narvi. And together they're talking to the king, and they're like, yeah, we're trying to find a way to get the light, to dig new shafts so we can get the light in. Narvi says, my dig teams haven't been able to do it. Tisa's like, I'll help. And she tries to sing, and she almost gets it. But then it's just like, it just fails. It's just like the outer skin of Khazad-dûm, the mountain itself, it's kind of unstable. And they just end up, losing more within that. It's like, it's just so sad, man. And King Durin's like, stone singers used to be this incredible conduit between ourselves and the stone. They were very, it's like he's speaking like almost religiously about them, right? And then he's like, but they failed. He's like, dude, you're doing these are really dirty right now. Like, but I think it's such a great moment to every scene that Tisa is in, the actress Sophia Nomberi, she's just marvelous. So that was good stuff. And the whole story is involving that, and I really enjoyed that part. I said before in my video for season one that the dwarven scenes and the scenes between Durin the Fourth and Elrond, they were the best of season one, and that still holds here because now we just see the dwarves on their own, and the writer just setting up the story for how the dwarves could get swept up in Halbrand's machinations. The opportunities created there for Halbrand, for Sauron to really corrupt the dwarven people, and it was like, yeah, I'm liking this. My only concern is that the way they're doing some stuff, and with the reveal of the Balrog in season one, I have this really bad feeling that by the end of the show, season five or whatever it is, they are already confirmed for 5 seasons. So like this probably happens in like season five. I think they're going to give us the destruction of Khazad-dûm, which I think is going to be a huge mistake. The destruction of Khazad-dûm does not happen in the Second Age. It's an event that happens in the Third Age, just like 1,000 years before the story of Lord of the Rings. Not sure if I mentioned that in my season one rewatch, but this is becoming a very big fear of mine that they're going to do this, and it's just going to have like so many freaking repercussions down the road if they ever get to do something else with if Amazon gets to do something else with Lord of the Rings after this. But all the same, I thought this was really good stuff. It was very well done, and also this is something like, okay, so this was a better structure for the 2 episodes than what we saw in season one, because season one in the first 2 or 3 episodes, it's like they have to introduce every single thing, right? Every single thing, and then it's just like, okay, we're just shifting here and there. It's like boom, 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 which they're telling a little bit more focused story this time around, which I appreciate. But also, it's like whenever we get the scenes with Nori and the stranger, it's like I just want to like throw my hands in the air, to like be like, can I just skip all this? Because it's something that just doesn't speak to me. It just doesn't interest me at all. But I have to watch the scenes anyway because there's so much context going on, and I'm just like, the way that they're telling the story, they're still not telling us at the end of the 3 episodes, still not telling us who the stranger is. Like, come on, guys, just like make it clear. And then they introduce this other Istari, or he might not be an Istari, but he's some dark wizard, played by, and I'm hoping I am not butchering the name, but if I am, I really apologize for that. Ciaran Hinds, Kiaran Hinds. Kieran Hins. I'm sorry. I really apologize for mispronouncing the name, but he's playing the Dark Wizard who rules in Rune. And man, any project I watch with that actor, marvelous. He was great in Game of Thrones. He was great in the movie John Carter. He was great in Rome. He was great in what little scenes we had. He was in this MI6 show last year or the year before that, and that was really good stuff too. And then just like anytime you see him on screen, he is a marvelous actor, amazing voice, and it's just like just lifts the spirits up. But he's playing a villain again, and he has that menacing quality to him in that way. And it's like his introduction and things that he does. It's like this guy, you really gotta be wary of him. It's like you don't f with this guy because he's gonna f you up in turn, and he's gonna repay that like 1,000 times. Or and he's introduced as this new character, possibly in a starring himself, one of the Blue Wizards, which again begs the question of who are all these A-star? It's like there's just so much uncertainty in the show with these characters, and it's like it's really like it nags at you every time you're watching the scenes, and whatever they're doing, the Strange, it's like yeah, so he still doesn't have control of his powers. He still goes out of control, and Nori is still kind of scared of him, and then they throw in Poppy. Poppy just shows up out of nowhere. Presumably, it's been like a few days, at least, maybe a few weeks even, since the end of season one. And, it's like, okay, so first of all, at the end of season one, she stays behind with the Harfoots. But now she's all the way in room with them. How did she follow them? And their supplies are running out. There were two people. Their supplies are running out, but she still has supplies. And she's like, "Oh, I brought some of Static's books with me, and I figured out that the singing, the not the singing song, the that doesn't even make sense. Singing song, the walking song that the Harfoots have, it's some kind of directions, and the Harfoots came from Rune, and we can just backtrace all of that and find our way through this miserable desert place." And it's like, I'm like, is she for real? Is she a plant by the Dark Wizard or something? It's I'm just like I'm like really suspicious of whether this is the real Poppy or not. It'll probably end up being that she is, but and I really don't care. It's such a weak storyline, and they're just like bumbling their way through all of that, and they're setting up like even more mysteries to do with the character, and it's just not working for me at all because there's just too much left unsaid. If you tell us that yeah, this is Saruman, or this is Gandalf, or this is Radagast, or this is one of the Blue Wizards, then yes, you have certain expectations and you can move with that. But we're just like constantly like smart money is Saruman or Gandalf, but at the same time, it could be Radagast. It could be one of the Blue Wizards. It's like okay, I'm like I'll watch this. It's whatever. It's the weakest storyline, and they have some, runic men after them as well, who are under the command of the Dark Wizard, and he's the one who actually sent those three cultists or whatever in season one to hunt down the stranger, believing him to be Sauron. But it's whatever. It's a really weak storyline, and I just can't with it. Because the whole thing with them is like the Harfoots, especially Nori and her younger sibling, they whenever they got hurt when dealing with the stranger, it was because of something that they did, not something that the stranger did. The stranger was doing something on his own, and they like interrupt him, or they like step within the sphere of influence, and then they get hurt. So it's none of that's really on the stranger, and it's like, oh, okay, so just the dynamic is weird. I guess they're trying to evoke Gandalf and Pippin from Return of the King, but I don't know. It just feels weird, man. Really not sure how to describe it. But yeah, that's that. And then finally, we have episode 3. And this was both the best episode of the season so far and quite possibly also the worst. It's the best because it has Numenor. It's the best because it has Elendil, it has Miriel, it has Pharazôn, but it's also the worst because it is Numenor, because it has Pharazôn, because it has Iarian, and it's just a complete mess. Like, yes, I loved that we got to see more of Numenor because I cannot have enough of Numenor. The story of the rise and fall of Numenor is one of the most engaging stories within Silmarillion. And while I continue to lament the direction that they've gone with for Numenor, it's still fun to see all that stuff. There's a scene involving Valandil, who is one of the Sea Guard, who was friend to Isildur, Elendil's son, and they lost their friend Ontamo during the attack when Mordor erupted, or the Mount Doom erupted, and then Isildur's missing, nowhere to be found, and he's the only one left of his trio, and he has the scars of those battles, and he comes across Pharazôn and Iarian and Pharazôn's son Kemen, and they're trying to scheme against the queen, and he steps in, and he's like, I watched her go to battle. She fought for her people. She fought to search for Isildur after he went missing. And you're all sitting here disrespecting her name, disrespecting Isildur's name. And as a soldier, I'm not going to stand for it. And Kemen's like, he tries to stand up to Valandil, and Valandil's like, sit your ass down, boy. Basically, it's like, it was hilarious. I loved Valandil. Valandil is like, he's such a badass, right? He's the most dedicated among his friends, and he is literally, the most accomplished because he doesn't have kind of like I wouldn't say the lagardeness of Ontamo, but he is very serious. He's dedicated, and he really wants it. Whereas Isildur was like, he just wanted to half-ass it or whatever. But such a fun character to see. I'm surprised they didn't show more of him in the episode, given some of the stuff happens. But that was a highlight, which then again just highlights in a different way the worst aspects of the episode, which is just the whole scheming thing going on with the Numenor with Pharazôn, where he wants to take control of the kingdom, usurping the throne from Miriel, pretty much, and Iarian is helping him. Iarian is like one of the most frustrating characters on the show, and a large part of that is because she is an original character developed for the show. She doesn't appear in any record by Tolkien, and she's betraying her family full speed. She doesn't care about her father. She doesn't care that Isildur's missing. She's very happy to use Isildur's. She probably thinks he's dead, and she's using that for her own ends, and she's just ready to betray everybody. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not with that. It's like the whole point of Elendil's family is that his family was the one that was ultimately true to the old ways of Numenor, where they respected the Valar, they worshipped Iluvatar, and they believed in all of that. Whereas Pharazôn and his buddies, none of them do that, and they are the ones who eventually fall under Sauron's influence, and they end up worshipping Morgoth. And their actions and their decisions ultimately lead to the ruin of the Elven Kingdom. And like I said in my season 1 rewatch review, it's like, yeah, I guess I get what they're doing with the Aryan. It's like she is this, villain from inside the house of Elendil, but I think that takes away from what his legacy is ultimately going to be. And yeah, there was so much happens with Yarian in this episode, and I wasn't a fan of any of that. In fact, I think the way that Farazan is being done is also not working because yeah, they do show that he is a master of a politician and everything, but the way that the dialogue is written, it leaves a lot to be desired. And kind of frustratingly, the guy who was yelling about the elves taking your trades and the elves in your cities and taking your homes and everything in F season one, he's conspicuously missing. It's like would have been better if they showed him on screen again. It's like help tie things in together, but Farazan has a new conspirator, so it's whatever. And then it's like there's a struggle, an internal struggle going on with Elendil, where he's torn by his duty to Miriel, his promise to return to Middle Earth, to have vengeance for his son, but also what the cost has been. Yeah, he's leaning towards Muriel's side and everything, but it's like I think that the performance by Lloyd Owen is amazing. Him playing off against Cynthia Day Robinson's Muriel is pretty damn good. They're leaning on each other in a lot of different ways, and we can kind of see that what is going to happen. It's like her death eventually is going to be one of his biggest regrets in life, and they are setting up all of that. And it's like there's a scene that happens towards the end of the episode, like pretty much just the climax. And I was for sure thinking that oh man, stuff is going down. It's like hold your horses, but you know, good stuff. But yeah, anyway, that's Numenor. We get frustrating little to do with elves, and by that I mean just stuff to do with Galadriel and Elrond, because by now Gil-galad has told Galadriel that if she's gonna go to Region and find what is going on there with Celebrimbor and with how Sauron has returned there or not, you're not going there as a leader, and you're not going there alone. And I'm going to send Elrond with you, and he's going to be in command of your group. And that's a lot of tension, which once again I really enjoy the tension between the central Elven characters, because at this point none of them really trust each other. There's been that loss of innocence, so to speak, you know, and I'm really enjoying that uh, texture to their relationships. It is adding so much more to the story, and I can't wait to see stuff that happens, because the mistakes that Galadriel has made, those mistakes are going to be leading to so much ruin, so much misery, so much grief that it's practically the second coming of Morgoth, or third coming of Morgoth rather. So you have that, but it's like yeah. So whatever we're gonna see, it better be some really damn good stuff, because I think the way that the episode 3 ends, they are involved, and it's going to be something really interesting, because the wild men are out. They're all not Elrond, Galadriel. They're on the way to Eregion, and they're probably going to pass by Pelargir. Pelargir's story, we see that Isildur is alive. I mean, of course, Isildur is going to be alive. Nothing's going to happen to Isildur. He has to survive through the Third Age, and he has to fall at the Gladden Fields while carrying the One Ring back to Elrond and Rivendell to destroy it. But just the way it was done, because as we see in at the end of season 1, and again they repeat a portion of it in this episode, when the Numenorians are preparing to leave Middle Earth, they're preparing to leave the Southlands. Beric, Isildur's horse, runs away. Now we see that he goes back to Mordor. Goes back to the Southlands, to the village that Theo and Bronwyn are from, and he's searching for Isildur there. But then he encounters some orcs who want to capture him, possibly to eat him. But he escapes them into the Black Forest, and then in the Black Forest there's this one cave where Isildur has been captured by some spiders. And I'm like, are they trying to reference Shelob here? Which is like, the referential nature of Rings of Power has really frustrated me since the start of season one. And once again, they don't say it outright, but it's like, yeah, they are kind of trying to reference Shelob here in some way, which is like, why? And it's all the more weird because Isildur is supposed to have gone missing within the village, but now he's like, a few miles away in some cave in a forest, captured by spiders, and they never tell us what happened there. So, it's just more weird stuff. I don't know what the hell they're doing, and that's why I said, this is one of the best episodes and also the worst episode of the new season because it's like they're just doing set piece after set piece after set piece. The connective tissue between all these storylines isn't really there. Stuff happens and they just skip to the different beats rather than building some stuff up because now it's like, okay, so Isildur disappears from the village. He shows up in Pelargir. Theo is there, Arondir is there. There's some storyline involving him and a possible female love interest. And it's like, okay, sure, fine. And then his brother Anarion is missing still, which is doubly frustrating, because they've dropped his name like maybe twice in season one. None here, even when, Isildur goes into some detail about how his mother died when he was young. Anarion isn't mentioned, and it's like, there's just so much going on, right? And I thought the Pelargir story was really weak. It's just a continuation of the stuff from the Southlands, and the Southlands stuff was all boring and it wasn't really interesting at all. And then, more of that here now. So we just keep continuing on with all that stuff. And then, finally coming back to the story of the dwarves, at the end of episode 2, Celebrimbor invites Durin to visit him in Eregion, and he presents him with his scheme about the 7 rings for the dwarves, and that he needs Mithril, and in return for that, he's going to provide the rings, of course, and also probably some other benefits or whatever. Which dwarves are in a pickle. They're literally caught between a rock and a hard place, so they have really no choice. And I thought it was really interesting because of how Sauron tries to ensnare Durin and Disa, but they're like, they're kind of wise to what he's doing, and also they're not as taken in by his charms as Celebrimbor was, and also because Sauron makes so many mistakes. It's not apparent to you at a glance, but Durin's reaction and later when he's discussing it all with Disa, you really understand that, okay, so this guy is some kind of a fakeo. He really doesn't know Elrond, and Elrond wouldn't say all those things about him. So that was all neat stuff. But anyways, that's pretty much all of the episodes so far. Episodes 1, 2, and 3. I still have to watch episode 4 and 5, and episode 6 is going to come out on like Thursday or Friday. So I have that to watch as well. So it's going to be a bit of a rough catch up. Overall, the story, I'm mixed on the story. There are some good bits, there are some really terrible bits, and it's pretty much like middle of the road right now for me. I guess I'm still like neutral on everything. I'm not a fan of the departure from the lore, but at this point, with everything they're doing, I'm pretty much resigned to it. So it's like, it's whatever. They can just do whatever. I'm just hoping that the writing tightens up and that we get a really cohesive story, because that's really what's missing in the sauce right now. And it's like the writers, they just want to tell the cool set pieces. They don't want to do a lot of the legwork to get to those set pieces. So a lot of the payoff, it doesn't land because there's no setup for any of it. The visuals, they continue to be amazing. The cinematography is absolutely excellent. I will say though that the sound design it's really irritating me. If I'm watching the show on my laptop, it's mostly fine. I can hear things just fine. But if I'm watching it on my smart TV, on on a Fire Stick, then it's like I really need to turn up the volume a lot, and even then, it's a bit like 80-20 whether I hear some of the dialogue or not, leaning towards hearing dialogue, of course. But there's this like 20% chance that I just cannot listen to the dialogue, and I have to like just trust in the subtitles that what the subtitles are that okay, they make sense, because otherwise I would be quite lost. And there's also the fact that there's a lot of night scenes in the season so far, and they're kind of taking away from things. There's some parallels in episode 3 about funerals and everything, and the way that it's happened in one scene compared to how it's handled in the second scene, it's just practically day and night difference. Because the second one, the one that follows after the first one, it really was very dark. It shouldn't have been that dark by far. And that's one of the those little things that just takes away from the whole thing. And it's just like, yeah, that wasn't as pleasant an experience. So like I said, I'm still neutral on the show. I think there's some good elements to it still, but also the story is just going wacky and wild, and it's you know I'm not a fan of a lot of stuff that they're doing, basically. But as a fan of Lord of the Rings, I'm just like, I really need to know what's happening and how it's going to happen, because it's going to, eventually it's going to form part of the canon, so to speak. This is so. There's the Tolkien books. There's the revisions that Tolkien did. There's the revisions that his son Christopher did. There's the canon with Peter Jackson with Lord of the Rings. There's the canon with Peter Jackson with the Hobbit movies, and now there's this canon where Rings of Power, and then there's going to be canon with War of the Rohirrim, which is an animated show that's going to come out very soon. I believe it comes out in November this year, also on Prime. It's looking really good. Some amazing voice acting, some amazing visual design as well. I can't wait for that thing. That looks super neat, and it's covering something that we know. Once again, it's so frustrating little. So they have a lot more. They have a lot of room to develop, but also because there's so much such less material on it that they can really tell a really cool story with the large brushstrokes, and it's very different to what was happening with Rings of Power, because all of the stuff that's going to happen in War of the Rohirrim, it's like a few hundred years before King Theoden, and also it happens over a much smaller time scale. Even it's a war between men which lasts a few years. That's it. So there's a lot less room to screw up basically the larger lower canon, legendary, whatever you want to call it. So anyways, that's it for me, guys, with episodes 1, 2, and 3 of Rings of Power Season 2. We will continue to watch Season 2 until the last episode, Episode 8, and see how it goes. But I think that by the end, we're definitely going to be forging the 9 rings, and that the 1 ring is definitely going to be left for the next season. Or I believe it should be. One set of rings. Should have been one set of rings per season, I guess. But the way that they're progressing, I think we're going to see the forging of both the rings for the dwarves and the rings for the men in this season. And of course, the stranger stuff. It's whatever. So anyways, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on all the social medias. All the relevant descriptions and links will be in the description below. And also, share the video if you liked it. Let me know what your thoughts are. And I'll see you for the episode 4, 5, 6 review whenever that happens. Hopefully sometime this week. Although I want to spread out the videos for those, because covering so many episodes in one go, it is really quite a tough challenge. And I am not sure if I'm up to the task. I don't feel I am, but we'll see. So cheers, guys. See you again soon. Bye. Cheers.